Hello there and welcome. My name is Zeke Ward and this is the Stuff of Dreams. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome, and if you are returning, fantastic. We are back reading the complete tales of Beatrix Potter's Peter Rabbit. Last time we read the tale of Peter Rabbit, and if you did not get to read that, there's a little link here that you can click on that will take you to the other video where you can read along with us of the tale of Peter Rabbit. And for this video, we're going to be reading the tale of Benjamin Bunny, which also relates to Peter Rabbit. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that right now. So this is the tale of Benjamin Bunny. And now Benjamin Bunny is, I think he's supposed to be a more well-behaved rabbit than Peter Rabbit is, and I believe you can tell that just by looking at the picture here of Benjamin Bunny. He looks like a much more put together and well-behaved rabbit to me. So this is the tale of Benjamin Bunny. One morning, a little rabbit sat on a bank. He pricked his ears and listened to the trit-trot of a pony. A gig was coming along a road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in her best bonnet. And I think a gig is a kind of old-fashioned wagon that was pulled by a pony that two people could sit in and take rides in. So, and here's Benjamin Bunny sitting there with his jacket on, and he's listening to Mr. and Mrs. McGregor go driving by. Now, as soon as they passed, little Benjamin Bunny slid down into the road and set off, with a hip, hop, skip, and a jump, to call upon his relations, who lived in the wood at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. And his relations, of course, I think, are Peter Rabbit, Flopsy Mopsy Cottontail, and their mother. That wood was full of rabbit holes, and in the neatest, sandiest hole of all lived Benjamin's aunt and his cousins, Flopsy Mopsy Cottontail and Peter. Now, old Mrs. Rabbit was a widow. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought a pair at a bazaar. That's a kind of marketplace. She also sold herbs and rosemary, tea, and rabbit tobacco, which is what we call lavender. I love lavender. Now here's old Mrs. Rabbit there. Oh, and it's Flopsy Mopsy Cottontail and Peter. So, little Benjamin did not very much want to see his aunt. Oh. He came around the back of the fir tree and neatly tumbled upon the top of his cousin, Peter. Peter was sitting by himself. He looked poorly and was dressed in a red cotton pocket handkerchief. "Peter," said little Benjamin in a whisper, "who has got your clothes?" Peter replied, "The Scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden," and described how he had been chased about the garden and had dropped his shoes and coat. Now little Benjamin sat down beside his cousin and assured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out on a gig, and Mrs. McGregor also, and certainly for the day, because she was wearing her best bonnet. So they were going to be gone all day, I guess. Peter said that he had hoped it would rain, and at this point, old Mrs. Rabbit's voice was heard inside the rabbit hole calling, "Cottontail, Cottontail, fetch some more chamomile." Peter said he thought he might feel better if he went for a walk. There's Benjamin Bunny and Peter, and they're going for a walk. So they went away hand in hand and got upon the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the wood. From here, they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were plainly to be seen upon the Scarecrow, topped with an old tam o' shanter of Mr. McGregor's. That's a kind of hat, a Scottish hat. Now little Benjamin said, "It spoils people's clothes to squeeze under the gate. The proper way to get in is to climb down a pear tree." Peter fell down head first, but it was of no consequence as the bed below was newly raked and quite soft. There's Peter and Benjamin climbing the pear tree into Mr. McGregor's garden. There's just nothing good that is going to come of this, I don't think. We'll see what happens, though. It had been sown with lettuces. So, he fell into a bed of lettuces. They left a great many odd little footmarks all over the bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs. Little Benjamin said that the first thing to be done was to get back Peter's clothes, in order that they might be able to use the pocket handkerchief. They took them off the Scarecrow. There had been rain during the night, and there was water in the shoes, and the coat was somewhat shrunk. Benjamin tried on the tam o' shanter, but it was too big for him. There's Benjamin trying on that big hat right there, as you can see. Then he suggested that they should fill the pocket handkerchief with onions as a little present for his aunt. Peter did not seem to be enjoying himself. He kept hearing noises. I bet Peter was nervous because he got caught by Mr. McGregor last time. Benjamin, on the contrary, was perfectly at home and ate a lettuce leaf. He said that he was in the habit of coming to the garden with his father to get lettuces for their Sunday dinner. The name of little Benjamin's papa was Old Mr. Benjamin Bunny, and the lettuces certainly were very fine. Peter did not eat anything. He said he should like to go home. Presently, he dropped half the onions. Little Benjamin said that it was not possible to get back to the pear tree with a load of vegetables. He led the way boldly toward the end of the garden. They went along the little walk planks under a sunny red brick wall. The mice sat on their doorsteps cracking cherry stones. They winked at Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. So there's Peter and Benjamin right there. And they're the little mice. They're cracking their cherry stones. Presently, Peter let the pocket handkerchief go again. Uh-oh, he dropped more vegetables. They got amongst flower pots and frames and tubs. Peter heard noises worse than ever. His eyes were as big as lollipops. He was a step or two in front of his cousin when he suddenly stopped. This is what those little rabbits saw around that corner. Oh gosh, look at that. It's the cat. Cats are not good news for little rabbits. Little Benjamin took one look, and then in half a minute, less than no time, he hid himself and Peter and the onions underneath a large basket. The cat got up and stretched herself, and came and sniffed at the basket. Perhaps she liked the smell of onions. Anyway, she sat down upon the top of the basket. She sat there for 5 hours. Oh my gosh, there's the cat, sitting on top of the basket with poor little Benjamin and Peter under there. They should never have gone into Mr. McGregor's garden. I cannot draw you a picture of Peter and Benjamin underneath the basket because it was quite dark, and because the smell of onions was fearful. It made Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry. The sun got round behind the wood, and it was quite late in the afternoon, but still the cat sat upon that basket. At length there was a pitter-patter, and some bits of mortar fell down from the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Mr. Benjamin Bunny prancing along the top of the wall of the upper terrace. He was smoking a pipe of rabbit tobacco and had a little switch in his hand. He was looking for his son. There's old Mr. Benjamin Bunny up here. See him? He's dressed very sharp. He looks good. Old Mr. Bunny had no opinions whatever of cats. He took a tremendous jump off the wall and onto the top of the cat, and cuffed it off the basket, and kicked it into the greenhouse, scratching off a handful of fur. Way to go, old Mr. Bunny. The cat was too much surprised to scratch back. When old Mr. Bunny had driven the cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he came back to the basket and took out his son Benjamin by the ears and whipped him with the little switch. Then he took out his nephew Peter. There he is. See, he's giving little Benjamin and Peter a little whipping for disobeying and being bad little rabbits. Then he took out the handkerchief of onions and marched out of the garden. There they go. They're leaving the garden there. When Mr. McGregor returned about half an hour later, he observed several things which perplexed him. It looked as though some person had been walking all over the garden in a pair of clogs, only the footmarks were too ridiculously little. That's Benjamin Bunny. Also, he could not understand how the cat could have managed to shut herself up inside the greenhouse, locking the door upon the outside. Poor Mr. McGregor. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him because she was so glad to see that he had found his shoes and coat. And Cottontail and Peter folded up the pocket handkerchief, and old Mrs. Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them from the kitchen ceiling, with the bunches of herbs and the rabbit tobacco. The end. Now there's old Mrs. Rabbit with Peter, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. She was just glad to get Peter back, I suppose. So that's the end of that story. That one's a little bit shorter than this tale of Peter Rabbit. It looks like the tale of Benjamin Bunny doesn't last as long, but it sure seems like Benjamin is just as much of a troublemaker as Peter is. Although I think they're just curious. So, that was the end of the tale of Benjamin Bunny, and so the next time we're going to be reading the tale of Mr. Todd. And I have no idea who Mr. Todd is, so I'm looking forward to hearing about Mr. Todd and seeing what happens. But I certainly enjoy this very much, and I am looking forward to the next time, so if you enjoyed this, I hope that you'll join us next time for the tale of Mr. Todd. See you later.